people need to chill the fuck out.
White South Africans excel at academics and competition. And what we need to therefore understand and acknowledge that competing with us on merit remains a scary prospect that most black South Africans won't support. It's hard to say that. And it's also hard to say we seem to be surviving BEE.
I thought let me share first that sweetest video at the beginning and followed by the one that is not so sweet, because I just want to show appreciation to white people that are for South Africa, that are trying all their best to come against the false narrative that is being pushed by a certain group of people that are white in South Africa, like taking advantage of a weak government that we have had for so many years under the ANC, and that Trump is there as a pro-white supremacy president. They are taking advantage of that. You can see it by they going to Trump now and then to say, "Daddy, this is what has happened. Daddy, they are pinching me. Daddy, 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 daddy." So I thought let me appreciate people like these ones who are trying so hard to say, you know what, this is not true. Am I praising them or maybe showing a grateful heart because they are white? Yes, because they have the white privilege. It's a no-brainer. They have the white privilege. They get ahead easily. That is where my problem is with the Democratic Alliance, which make them look like AfriForum. Why are they not using their white privilege to correct certain things? All right, I don't want to waste much of your time. I would like to say thank you to people like these ones. Ulrich, Janse van Vieren. My mom used to work for the Van Vierens. I had a productive trip to the US. I also took every opportunity to share about amazing South Africa, our credible people and country, challenged harmful myths, the false white genocide narrative, and other outrageous misinformation whenever they came up in conversation. You see, these are the white people that we need. He is not the only one that I'm going to share the information with. I'm going to share video clips at the end, just in appreciation of the white people that are for South Africa. And I want to share the post of many people quoting this post of Van Vieren. And this one said, "This man is a true patriot." You see, we are desperate to have white people debunking what is said by other white people in this country about South Africa. You know, this is why we appreciate them so much, because no matter how much we can scream as black people, it's not going to reach the ears that is supposed to reach. We applaud this fellow South African for being part of the solution. Exactly. And this one said, "Well done, Ulrich." You see, we appreciate him. And please don't forget that I'm still going to share video clips of other people, white people, at the end. And I'm just going to allow you to watch that. And we appreciate their effort. And this one says, "True South African." You see, and if you notice, it is black people that are quoting this post of Van Vieren. It is black people, because we feel like no one is listening, no one is going to listen on the white side, that Trump side and Elon side. Thank you for standing up against lies and misinformation. And also, that Elon situation. And I also saw what IMF said. For me, they're still lobbying for Starlink, so I don't care. There you go, my G. That's what any true South African should do. You know, I don't really want to focus on what IMF said because it upsets me. I'm yet to look into it because we don't know what is what at this moment. If Elon Musk can capture America like that, what is stopping him from using IMF as well? And this one says, "A true patriot, the minority will hate you for this." You see, these are the white people that are South African, that know that their home is in South Africa. So we really love and appreciate such things, because we have a white government in the US that is pushing white supremacy. So we need this. Danko brew. You see, black South Africans, this thing that South Africa is against white people is always debunked by such things, where black people are showing appreciation, whereby white people are showing appreciation of black people. So that unity, we must protect Ulrich. You see, we appreciate him so much. Ulrich Janse van Vuren, we appreciate you. I hope I pronounced that very well. Always when I see the same name Van Vuren, I always think of my mom. May his soul continue to rest in peace, because she used to love her bosses, the Van Vurens. She used to love them. And we appreciate you, this Zanele. You see, it is black people that are appreciating Ulrich as a white person, because we know the privilege that they have. This is not an individual's thing. Yes, it is an individual's thing, because they are trying. We appreciate the individuals. This one says, let them hear this. We appreciate the individuals, but most importantly, we are going for the privilege that they have. So when they stand against what is wrong, which is being done by other white people, it goes a long way. It really does. We cannot, there's no two ways about that. It really does. So what I want to do next, I want to leave you watching the video clips of the different white people who are South Africans, just brightening our day and giving hope in this anger triggering situation that is pushed by your Cape Independence, AfriForum, Volksstad, all those people, even the silence of the Democratic Alliance, who are sneaky. Suddenly they are talking from the United States. You don't know what is going on, so we need such people.
How did white South Africans get so wealthy? South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. And it freaks me out how many South Africans complain about BEE, or they say 30 years of democracy, isn't that enough for you? In exactly that accent. And how little most South Africans know about economic apartheid, how far colonial and apartheid governments went to lift up white people and suppress people of color for hundreds of years. The simple truth is, black economic empowerment is nothing compared to white economic empowerment. Your parents may have worked hard, very hard, but the paler their skin, the more they benefited from extraordinary government economic aid. And here's when old people say, oh no, but what about this black person who's wealthy, or this black person who's made a lot of money? But here's the thing, right? Bad systems always hide behind miracle cases, the radical exceptions that make it out of a bad system even though it doesn't support them at all. They try to make it look like the exception, the miracle, is the average person in the system. And everybody who doesn't make it, well, that's their fault. It's not the system's fault. So here's the issue with white economic empowerment: how white people benefited from extraordinary government economic intervention. You know that speaking about apartheid is hard. So much of it happened off the record, people dispute it. So I'm going to make this super simple. All I'm going to do is tell you about a handful of apartheid policies that were enacted on the record, no doubt about it, that advantaged white people and oppressed black people. So let's start in 1910, when the Union of South Africa was formed. Literally, the country was invented for the first time, and government policies affected everybody in the country. The Second South African War had just ended. It was between the Brits and the Boers, and the Brits won. But they wanted to unite all white people together, especially Afrikaners, because they'd been fighting each other and killing each other for years. And so immediately, they made it that no people of color could vote. Instantly, unite the white people, only they can vote, only they can control the making of the new country. Then in 1913, the Land Act made it illegal, impossible for black people to own land outside of reserves. That meant 93% of all land in South Africa was only available to white people. Then, in the early 1920s, poor white Afrikaners protested that most of big industry was dominated by British companies, and those companies were hiring skilled black workers over them. In response, the government funded enormous public works programs, like building the Hartbeespoort Dam, and they only hired poor white workers. They literally made programs to make jobs for poor white, particularly Afrikaner workers. Also in 1925, the Wage Act made a minimum wage for white workers but not black workers, and the government offered incentives to companies applying for tenders. The more white workers you employ, the more likely you are to win work. Let's jump to 1948, when the National Party returns to power and formalizes apartheid for the very first time. And the first thing they do is direct massive funding to social programs and welfare grants for poor white people, and slashed funding for people of color across the board. In 1950, the Group Areas Act stopped black people from moving through South Africa freely. They had to get permission to go places, always on white people's terms, and this made it incredibly hard to find work. In the 1950s and 60s, the apartheid government fixed black people's pensions, which meant that as inflation increased, the value of those pensions got less. At the same time, white people's pensions increased dramatically. Black South Africans were forced into the Bantu Education Act in 1953, where they were literally only taught how to do basic, unskilled labor. They were reduced to servitude. The Nats worked incredibly hard to promote white, specifically Afrikaner-owned business. You know why the Nats had African language radio stations through the SABC? To make money for white people off of black people. In the 60s, the apartheid government handed out millions of radios and ran the African language stations themselves. Obviously, they used it for propaganda to try and control the flow of information around apartheid, but they also gave ad space, reaching this massive new audience to white, especially Afrikaner-owned businesses at knockdown rates. And some of the biggest companies in South Africa today started that way. Afrikaner-owned, benefiting from ad space on African language radio stations that the apartheid government handed them. I could go on, you get the point. And you know what I said earlier about the average experience showing what the system actually does? Well, let's look at what the apartheid system did to South Africa. In 1996, the first ever truly national census was taken, where all South Africans were asked what the reality of their lives were like. Because of apartheid, the 1996 census found that 21% of black South Africans lived in informal housing. That's over 6 million people. And you know how many white South Africans lived in informal housing in 1996? 0.1%. More than 7 million black South Africans in 1996 had no access to piped water. 97% of white South Africans had access to piped water. Let's talk about refuse removal. 59% of black South Africans had no access to regular refuse removal in 1996, more than 18 million people. 92% of white South Africans had access. Electricity. 56% of black South Africans had no access to electricity in 1996 at all, more than 17 million people. 99.6% of all white South Africans had good access to electricity. That is the reality that economic apartheid created in this country. A few weeks ago, there was a news headline. It said, "South Africa not ready for a white president." And you know how sometimes you see a news headline and you think, what a waste. Like, why did you waste the ink and paper on that? Obviously, South Africa's not ready for a white president, although it does make sense when you see who said that quote. It was the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. Sorry, Die Vryheidsfront Plus. This quote actually annoys me so much because it feels like it's implying that South Africans who aren't ready for a white president are somehow being unreasonable or should change or should think again. I mean, seriously, after centuries of abuse and oppression based on race by white people, and now what? They want trust. They want forgive and forget. That show got cancelled. Trust is earned, and I would say it's pretty damn reasonable to wait a little while longer to see if that trust is deserved. So, that's the issue with white economic empowerment. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Issue with Dan Corder. We release one episode every single week on YouTube, and we also have a podcast, which you can find on all the streaming platforms, and you can find our socials in the video bio. Please like, subscribe, spread the word. See you soon.
Is South Africa ready for a white president? For 30 years, white politicians have failed to resonate with black voters. Why? Because they refuse to accept a brutal truth. In a country where 80% of the population is black, you don't get to lead unless black South Africans want you to. And they don't, at least not yet. White politicians love to talk about policy, competence, and how the ANC has failed. But they forget about the reality of power, trust. And let's be honest, black South Africans don't trust white politicians. Why would they? The last time a white politician was in charge, they weren't citizens, they were subjects. And in 30 years of democracy, no white leader has done the work to change that perception. We are Europeans in Africa. That's a fact. We are also a political minority in a majority black country. That's also a fact. Ladies and gentlemen, if a white president ever wants to exist in South Africa, he would have to do what no white politician has ever done before. He will have to speak to black voters as equals, not as saviors, not as victims of reverse racism, and not as managers of a broken state, but as partners in a future where power is truly shared. And until that happens, the answer is no. South Africa is not ready for a white president, and that is not the fault of black people, it's our own.
I don't care who you tag, if it's the ANC, if it's the EFF, if it's the DA, if it's News 24, Nexus, I don't care, but just make sure they see this. The Cape Independence Movement has now unveiled some plans to release their own crypto coin. Why would they want to do this? Well, in their own words here, you can buy coins anonymously. These people who want to advocate for the secession of the Western Cape are now setting up means so that foreign funds can come directly into their movement. Are you living outside the Western Cape and looking to make Cape Town your future home? Surely there's someone at SARS that will be very interested to find out that a political movement inside South Africa is setting up ways so that foreign entities can send funds their way. I mean, is this not also potential money laundering efforts going on here? We don't know. But one thing we do know is that these guys, they definitely playing a shady game. They are definitely shady as hell. And this idea of a crypto coin to support their movement needs to be ended tomorrow.
So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. It was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto we Sizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. White government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto we Sizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 89. the things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles, and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a human.
So it's that time of the year again where white replacement and white genocide conspiracy theorists get together and talk about the white farm murders in South Africa. What are the white farm murders in South Africa? I'm so glad you asked. So in South Africa, there is this ongoing debate about white farm murders, because despite the fact that farmers of all color are being murdered and robbed on their farms because we live in a country with an incredibly high rate of violent crimes, white farmers seem to be the focus of attention. Why is that? It's suggested that white farmers in South Africa are being targeted with acts of violence as part of a political movement. Whether that happens anecdotally from individuals, I couldn't say. But as far as a collective movement or general occurrence, that is certainly not what is happening, despite what is being suggested by right-wing media. What is the case is that despite the fact white people only make up a measly 8% of the population in South Africa, white people also own proportionately more commercial agricultural properties than indigenous black people in South Africa. And I say proportionately because I'm not suggesting that white people own more commercial agricultural property than black people in general. I am saying that in relation to our population percentage, we do. So here are the facts. The fact is that both white and black South African farmers experience violent crimes as a result of the socioeconomic and generational wealth discrepancies experienced by many South African citizens. Another fact, farms are often remote, which inhibits expedient police responses. They're filled with expensive equipment, and they are worked on by so many people who often get a very good layout of the environment and which access points are easier than others. I have always said that farm murders in this country are a very serious problem and that farmers should be better taken care of by our government. But what I find incredibly sad is how quickly this issue has been co-opted by right-wing conspiracy theorists and American conservatives who just cannot mind their own fucking business. And I've seen so many videos of white Americans talking about how they've paid for white refugees from South Africa to save them from the farm murders, and then later finding out that those people have taken them for a ride, like free vacation, free immigration. Like, you guys are being played so hard and honestly deserved. You don't have to take my word on the fact that there is no white genocide in South Africa. I'm not going to pull a there's no war in Ba Sing Se on you guys. You just need to do the math. It's so simple. White people in this country, we make up 8% of the population. Our government is primarily indigenous black South Africans. Our population is primarily black indigenous South Africans. If any of those demographics wanted us gone, we would be gone overnight. Friend, you wouldn't even hear it. It would just be one night, we're all gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not happening. I don't know why this myth has become so tenacious in right-wing media. It for all the focus right-wing media has at the moment, it always comes back to South Africa. Like, we don't want you guys. You know what I mean? And I'll say it one more time, farm murders are a big problem in South Africa. We really should be taking extra steps to look after farmers and farm workers as well, because farm workers are also being targeted. What I'm not going to tell you is that this is all part of some elaborate and convoluted genocide of white South Africans, because that is simply not true. And whenever I say this, I have people in my comments leaving often uncited anecdotes suggesting that some of these attacks are racially motivated. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I would just be very hard-pressed to call that a genocide or a pattern of crimes, because that simply is not the case. So to all the white Americans who are giving free vacations to white South Africans who claim to be farmers escaping the genocide, please keep doing that, because we don't want them either, and you're getting played. So, you know, double points, I guess. But yeah, the fact of the matter is we do live in a country that has an incredibly high crime rate. And like I said earlier, farms are easy targets for crimes. And we should be looking after our farmers and concerned for their safety. But we should, instead of focusing on white farmers, realize that all farmers in South Africa are targets of violent crimes. And the fact that we have proportionately so many more white farmers in South Africa than black farmers is also a point of concern that actually does not lend itself well to this idea that there is a white genocide so much as it does to the concept of racial inequity in South African commercial agriculture. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. I don't usually make TikTok videos, but today I've got something to say, and it's the following. Donald J. Trump has got no business in South Africa. I don't know why he wants to get involved with anything with regards to South African politics or our household problems or whatever. I mean, it's like Ethiopia offering to go and sort out problems in the USA. Not that there's anything wrong with Ethiopia. It's a great country if you've ever been there, and I have. I'm just saying that one country shouldn't try and sort out the problems of another unless they ask you for that and unless the majority of the people are behind you. So stay out of South Africa, and the people who support Donald Trump, you really should have a look at what's going on inside your hearts. It's not very good.
So if you watched up to here, thank you for watching my videos. I just wanted to share that with you, that we do have the majority of white South Africans who are actually doing things right, who are not supporting what AfriForum and them are doing. We have seen them posting. Some don't even get a chance to post because they are not into that. But you can hear and feel that not everyone is supporting the AfriForum and all the things that are happening. Some are even vocal about speaking against that Cape Independence. We can even see with the signatures that were received by that Cape Independence group. So that Cape Independence group. So you can tell they didn't get much signatures. So there are white people that are against all this madness, the lies, all this commotion that is being caused. So those who are using their voices that is accompanied by privilege, we appreciate that. And the next time, guys, you bump into my videos, kindly watch my ads in full. It really goes a long way. And to those who are already watching my ads in full, guys, nibene mini emnandi.